Okay, I've got you. So hang on.
Oh, great, cool. All right, we figured it out.
Right. So welcome, Josh.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's really good of you to speak to me all the way from over the pond there, and at this time of day as well. And this is episode 2 of Sam Lou Uncased, which is a new series of podcasts on contemporary songwriters, kind of doing it their own way. So coming across your profile and then speaking to you a little bit on social, I just thought it would be great to be able to interview you and find out about life over in New York City as a singer-songwriter producer. So I'm just going to start with this. To quote from your own bio, Jay Allen's songs are folk songs written inside the whirlwind that is New York City. Country hymns tuned into the traffic hum and the subway rumble. So how does living in New York City influence your songwriting?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to say, because I haven't really haven't lived anywhere else, so it's kind of hard to say how it affects it, but I mean, the noise and the crowds and the pace, it has to affect it somehow, right? I think maybe like music becomes some kind of like escape from that stuff, where you can like slow things down for yourself. But maybe on the other hand, it just kind of creeps in, even if you sort of aren't meaning for it to. It's just there all the time, I do write a bit like on trains and like just walking in the street, there's something about like the moving, like the subway system where I'm always like writing lyrics, or like walking in the street, like I'll just, kind of like stop every now and then and write something down or sing it to my phone. So I don't know if that has to do with the city or not, but that's just something that I do.
Yeah, I can empathise with that a little bit, using voice memos. Do you use any apps?
Yeah, I use the voice memo. I mean, for years I had like a little cassette recorder, and it finally broke, and and I was probably going to get another one, and then it was around the time that like I realized I could just hit a button on the phone, and like, there's something that I don't like about having things like everything seems to be now connected to your phone, but I do use the voice memo because it's just easy. It's just a nice way to kind of like quickly get an idea down. I have a lot of like voice memos with like trucks going by and like, crowds of people in the background.
There are a lot of songwriting apps and things, aren't there, that they brought out recently. I've not gone down that road yet, but I think just recording sounds. I probably won't, but
I wonder. Yeah, I mean, I definitely haven't gone down that road either. I know there's like multi-tracking things you can buy, right?
As I understand, yeah. Okay, so you're kind of touching there upon my next question, which is, have you recorded in transit or on location, and how does the change of environment affect your songwriting, do you think?
That's a good question. I did this a record called Wonder City, where like the idea was kind of to let the city into the sound of the songs in a way. Like, I mean, the funny thing is like you're recording in small apartments in the city, and what you're trying your best not to get like these sounds of the traffic and whatever's coming through the window. And at that point I was like, well, maybe it's part of it, maybe like these sounds kind of belong in the songs in a certain way. And I did go out and like record sounds of traffic and trains and footsteps and things like that, and kind of mixed them in to a lot of the songs on that album. which was really kind of a fun experiment for me. I forgot the second part of your. What was the second part of your question?
It's all right. My questions tend to have about 3 in 1.
No, I just got it.
So
I was trying to explain that maybe in a better way.
No, that's really good. Just about how a lot of musicologists, they're looking at place and how place affects what we make and what we write, and a lot of researchers have kind of made work. Looking at, say, Bon Iver and going off to a cabin in the woods and recording and seeing, this kind of it's a bit Thoreauian in a sense. Just wondering how place affects what comes out in terms of the sound.
I know. Yeah, I always wonder about that kind of thing where like an artist will go off into, the middle of nowhere and make a record. And part of me thinks like, maybe they had those songs written before anyway, or maybe they truly did go out and just, started from a blank slate. It's a good question, and I think it's hard to know when you're the one doing it and you're in that place. I will say that I do enjoy bringing, sonically trying to bring a sense of place. Like, I mix for films quite often, and like there was a point where I started to think, when you're mixing a film, sometimes it's like, this scene, it kind of really needs the sound of crickets, or like it needs like a little bit of wind going by, and I'd switch to like mixing like a song, and I'd be like, this song, it would be cool to have crickets working. It kind of needs that too. And it's interesting for me to think, obviously there's like an element where you're bringing that in, whether it's something you recorded, or like maybe it's in the, I don't know, I'm losing my train of thought a little bit, but I do enjoy, I don't know, I think there's something cool to having that be in the songs, but I don't know how it gets there. Maybe is the more honest way to say it. And sometimes I think it's interesting to knowingly place it there.
Yeah, I was reading.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Maybe there's a way to edit that answer and make it sound more...
No editing. No editing like goes off at this end.
Talk about.
Slight delay there. I was reading an article today. It was about an interview with Van Morrison. And it was really funny because the reviewer was saying that Van Morrison wouldn't answer questions, and my thought was, he's had a life of being interviewed. He's probably at that point where, he's over it. And but he did seem to be a little bit abrupt to some of her answers. And the thing is that she told him towards the end of the interview, the interviewer, that his songs had really impacted her, perhaps more than any other songwriter, and I don't think he knew quite how to respond to that at the end, but it got me thinking, because he said, he just says, there's no rhyme nor reason, this is just instinctive, and really along that line of thought. And I wondered what you thought about that, when we're talking about Bon Iver, were the songs there anyway, would they have come out anyway?
Well, yeah, I don't think anyone knows, it's like, it's like, it's you no matter where you are in a certain way. But like, it's sort of a big life question too. It's like, what would your life be if you lived in a completely different place, it's so hard to know. The pace of a, sort of modern city is really something that it has to affect you. I mean, it probably affects your like very, your heart rate in a certain way. And maybe everything now is kind of accelerating a little bit everywhere. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'd have to go out to a remote cabin and see what happens.
Yeah. Or
I do sort of think I would take a lot with me. I don't think my brain would completely reset.
I think I'd probably just want to leave.
Yeah, I mean, right. You write a bunch of songs about how do I get back to the city.
Songs about escape rather than unrequited love.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
maybe. No, it's reminding me today. I went into the vocal booth in the studio that I've been using, and it was a bit like a cell. And no window. Kind of just and not that inspiring to create in. So it got me thinking about would a few plants or lamps make a difference? It's an interesting thing.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
do you normally record more at home or
yeah, it's I've had a portable studio. It's a Rode kit, and I quite like the fact that I can move around with it. So it's been with me to residencies and moved up and down the country with me.
That's great. Yeah.
But the issue is, of course, privacy when you're working in a domestic environment, sound issues, etc. So
of course, I know all about that.
Yeah. So the autonomy of it is great, but I think there's something about the physicality of going to a place, especially to record. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm on. I think I'm so used to the home recording thing at this point. I think there's really advantages to both ways, but at this point, I'm much more comfortable in a setting that I can set up, and I really like the sense of like you can do it when you feel like doing it. Like I want to do it. I want to record like late at night or just right this second. You know what I mean? Like set up a mic in 5 minutes. And your stuff is kind of all ready to go. And if it's not a good, if it doesn't work out, you just screw it. I'll do it another time. But that said, I mean, there's something about having to perform in a studio. I say having, I don't know why I said that, but it's a performance for that moment. It's like you're going to be there at that time, and there's people sort of behind the glass, and it's a different. I think it might bring something different out of a performer that doesn't happen at home. But honestly, I think something happens at home or in a space that you've set up that might not happen in the studio too. I mean, like all that like 90s indie sort of 4-track stuff is stuff that I love, like Iron and Wine, those early Iron and Wine records, or Guided by Voices, or Elliott Smith. It's like I think that stuff in a way had to happen in somebody's home. Like it wouldn't have been the same if they had a whole bunch of gear and a maybe limited amount of time in a studio. It's a tough one, I don't know the answer. I do know I'm personally more comfortable somehow in like home recording setups. For better or for worse,
It's and I think as a woman as well, made my debut album Mermaid in 2018 in a domestic space after work, and there was something very freeing about that as an autonomous space. The equipment was portable, but it was the prospect of just recording, composing, writing, singing in the moment, being an instrumentalist, doing the whole thing in the moment, and then playing back and finding out what you'd got, rather than anything pre-composed, so to say. And
I agree, and that's a really personal, or it can be a very personal thing. Is like figuring out, like you're saying, like what works for you, like what's the right thing, which it's sort of old school thing of like a producer like behind the glass listening to what you're doing and selecting takes maybe or suggesting things. I mean, I think that can be great, but I never really had that situation, so it's hard to know, but I agree. I mean, I think it's a freeing thing to like set up your own space and time, and like I really like what I do a lot is like as soon as I sort of finish a song and finish a lyric, like I sometimes really like to just record it really quickly, like before I even know what I'm doing or have thought about it too much. I have mics that are kind of set up and I can just pull them and grab them and within 10 minutes just do it. And sometimes that comes out really, really well.
Let's sorry, go on.
No. I was kind of. I wasn't sure.
That's all right. We jump forward to DIY, which is not a bad thing to do. I'm going to step back a bit. Your songs have been described as heartfelt. What does that even mean nowadays, Josh?
Oh man, I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question too. I mean, there's something about this time that's like, I think people are looking for some sort of idea of authenticity in music and maybe in a lot of other things. I mean, maybe because there's so much sort of commercial or formulated kinds of music, or like music where the intent is not really to sort of express something. It's just kind of moody, or I don't know. I can only sort of say like when I hear something, I feel like I can tell when somebody really means it, as opposed to maybe something that's a little more calculated or something. So, I mean,
you got me thinking of.
I would never say anything like that about my own. It's like I don't know really about my own stuff, but I feel like for other people's things, like that's what I'm always looking for.
Touching on authenticity. If we look back to the West Coast and singer-songwriter sort of genre, and thinking about Joni Mitchell and Nick Drake and Dylan, of course, and I know that Dylan's a big influence of yours as well. And
it's pretty good.
Good one to have. What you're touching upon about authenticity in the singer-songwriter. I've been thinking about this as I'm doing my research, and how we seem to. Is it a performance of authenticity?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting thing to think about.
Just think about country singers, and country music, and the whole thing is it's as if they're telling us a truth kind of thing. We go to country music because it's authentic, so to speak, but yet it is a performance. So I'm quite interested in that sort of gap between authenticity.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Like in country, especially at a certain time, it was almost like part of the thing that you sort of had to have that. And I think in folk music, or whatever you call the thing where people sing and play acoustic guitar, like in the 70s, like that was kind of something that was valued, whether it was, quote unquote real or not, It's hard, and these things are so hard to put your finger on. Why do you believe somebody, deeply, and somebody else, you can hear and be like, nah, I don't know about that guy, or you know what I mean?
Do you think though? Because I brought this up in I was at a house crit that we started doing at Glasgow for practice research. PhDers, and we were talking about this notion of embodied truth, and my point is that when we listen to a singer-songwriter perform, we are, you know, you feel it in your body, yeah, so you get goosebumps or you lump in the throat, or it's a physical sensation. And my point is that it's like an embodied truth. I was surrounded by a group of people that didn't want to hear the word truth. Post-truth, didn't you know? So I just wondered, and then they were questioning what I meant by that, and then of course I had to try and verbalise what I meant by that. And the point is, it's pre-verbal, I think. But what you're saying is like, how do you put that into words that you? So all I could say was that we relate. You're relating to something, aren't you? That you know to be a truth, perhaps. But I think it's more felt in the body. So this kind of embodied response is quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean the notion of post-truth in music is just blowing my mind up. I don't want to think that that's a thing, but yeah, I mean, there's also like things that maybe are brought to it by a performer that it's so hard to know, like when you say something is put on or whatever, but I mean, like David Bowie or something comes to mind, where like his singing it's so good, and it is put on in a certain way, but I feel like most people are really, it's emotional for a lot of people, and he's not even necessarily telling you that much about himself a lot of the time. But it cuts through sort of everything. I mean, you know, I don't know how to, like, he's not going for some sense of I'm an authentic singer-songwriter who's confessing to you. Almost ever. I mean, maybe some of the earlier things, but, you know, I don't, it's a difficult thing to get to.
I think what I'd say is I'd define Bowie as an artist, and I think there's a difference there between perhaps an artist and a singer-songwriter, even though I struggle myself with these definitions, because I think, you know, we're boxing artists in or whatever, but the traditional definition of singer-songwriter does stem from Joni Mitchell and Dylan and that, you know, Greenwich Village kind of professional vibe. And then you've got someone like Bowie that is changing and doing what an artist should, I suppose, and continually reinventing themselves and not sitting within any kind of box.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Are you happy with you know, if people should I describe you as a singer-songwriter? Does that fit you?
I don't know. I think I'm the wrong person to know it for sure. You know, I mean, obviously I sing and I write songs, you know, and something to me about that term, like it seems like it's hearkening back when people use it, like, you know, to the thing of like Joni Mitchell and you know, which isn't, I mean, I love Joni Mitchell, and I like a lot of those people from that sort of era. And I just don't know. I think what's happening, you know, now is it's a little bit different, but it doesn't quite have its own name, and it's hard to know if it needs a different name. I mean, like Will Oldham or something like that. Like, he's a singer-songwriter. He sings and he writes songs, but somehow calling him a singer-songwriter, I don't know if that totally fits him. But what is he? Is he a recording artist, you know, or Nick Cave or somebody like that? You know, it's like, how do you... I don't know, I guess is my short.
I think
short
Will Oldham is a really good case in point, though, because as an actor as well, you know, he's straddling so many genres there that he is, to me, he's very fluid.
And he's got this sort of Bonnie Prince Billy persona, which is, you know, it's hard to know.
I always think of the When I See a Darkness, the newer music video, not the original, you know, and he's got the masks and he's walking down the street, and I think that sums Will Oldham up in a way, that video, because he's singing that song in that particular way, yet it's a very performative piece of what is a very profound, I think one of the most, it's a very deep song, isn't it? There are so many renditions of it, but he plays with it. He's making a lightness of a song that he has sung in a very singer-songwriter fashion, if you might say.
I mean, the original recording is like straight up, it's whatever singer-songwriter means, like that's what
that's
is.
It.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it just, when I first heard that, I was like, oh, okay. Stay in a room with that for 3 days, but very, very powerful stuff.
Yeah.
He's great. Okay, yeah. We'll talk about Nick Drake a little bit as well. And
sure.
I was thinking about how, why singer-songwriters so often sing about love, or, there are these great themes, unrequited love being one of them. And looking at Nick Drake's life, quite a sad life, in a way, very introspective figure, often singing about love, to such a degree, and with those ethereal harmonies and that ability to play that way and to create his own world. Yet he never really experienced, an intimate relationship in real life, and he's pathologically shy. And I think that draws us into his performances as well, his persona there. So why is it that singer-songwriters so often sing about love and unrequited
I know,
love?
they gotta figure out something else, right?
They gotta get over it. They've got to get over it, I reckon.
I think he's great. Sorry, I interrupted you there.
Oh, that's the best answer. We really must move on. Joy. So go on then, answer my question.
No, I mean,
you're getting out of it, go on.
The funny thing is, I hadn't heard that about Nick Drake, that he, maybe didn't have like a quote unquote real relationship, really, or something like that.
He did struggle, on the personal front, and personal kind of relationship front, and listening to his music, anyone would think that he'd experienced those emotions. Perhaps he had, but again, it's perhaps a case of creating something and drawing us in as listeners that we can share vicariously with this experience, and that music might come from somewhere else. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways I could see it. I mean, there's so much longing in everything that he did, and that's like, I'm sure he. I don't know. I don't know about his life, but there's so much longing in those songs. It's like that would seem like that would do it. You know what I mean?
You said that so much better than me.
I don't know about that. Yeah, he's great. I spent a lot of time with his stuff when I was younger.
Tell me a bit about your influences.
Oh, sorry.
Tell me a little bit about your influences.
I don't know. I mean, it's all over the place. Right now, the only thing I want to hear is like old blues records from the '60s.
Yeah.
And Bill Callahan. For some reason, I really like that new record.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It's really good, right? Yeah.
Lyrics are quite phenomenal, I think. He played at the Usher Hall. I couldn't get up there, so I regret that, because he probably won't come back to these shores for a while to tour. He's been quite hermetic, hasn't he?
Yeah. I think this was the first thing he'd done in a while.
It's a beautiful album.
It's really great, yeah. So, I don't know. There's so much good stuff. I mean, I feel like I'm trying to think, like, Listen to the new Tom York record too as well, which I really like.
Really? I haven't heard it. I have problems with Radiohead, so
I could see that. I mean,
I just can't go. I don't listen to Radiohead anymore. I did listen to them in my teens, and I think it just for some reason Radiohead has an effect on me. I don't want to go to that place. Kind of.
It's pretty, it's pretty intense, I think, most of the time.
Yeah, but I do think he's a great artist, continuing to move on, and create different stuff.
Yeah, I admire him a lot. I feel like he, I mean, those early Radiohead records were huge for me and pretty much everybody that I knew at the time that was making music, OK Computer came out. Around the same time, there were a bunch of things like Grantley Buffalo. I loved that stuff. Man, it's hard to think. Big Star, I love Big Star, especially that third record.
I've got this strange sensation that I'm on KPXP or some kind of American radio station late at night. Do you listen to Dylan? Dylan on his station? Oh.
I've heard a lot of that. The podcast, which is so good. It's really great.
Yeah. I just think I just love to talk to Bob, into the early hours on his station. But there's something about American radio that I just love, so I often tune in. I don't know what it is, something transitory and kind of
interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like it's gone kind of downhill. I mean, at least in New York, there's not much of it anymore. I mean, KXP is very cool. I think the West Coast has us beat a little bit with good radio playing like modern stuff.
Tiny Desk concerts.
Yeah,
that's really good. Yeah. So I kind of watch because we don't do it that well over here.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think it's possibly just a bit more kind of diverse and a lot of respect, I think, for musicians and songwriters and in kind of these platforms and stations and that. And I'm not sure we do it so well over here. But
interesting.
I was thinking about Dylan, and I'm still dreading the day that I wake up and Dylan is trending on Twitter. And it is a fear, a minor fear.
Yeah. Well, he was for that.
He's trended a few
Rolling
times.
Thunder movie, which was really cool.
Yeah. I'm sure he's still on his never-ending tour, and I think he should be on his never-ending tour forever. Is that possible?
Yeah, I imagine that's the plan.
I hope so. There's one reviewer said his voice just gets better and better, and I can live with that one. But
yeah, I mean, I saw him like a year ago, and I couldn't believe how good it was. I mean, I was prepared for it to, be a good show, but man, band was on fire, and he was, reinterpreting these old songs in such interesting, cool ways that were like made sense for his age and who he is now. It really was something.
I think Boots of Spanish Leather, there's a rendition at the Carnegie Hall, and it was quite incredible. You can find it online. There's just something about that performance that I've always loved. Do you have a particular song of Dylan's that you find that you come back to that's kind of got a bit of a what can we say that's sort of been in your life or means something?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch, but I think I love like One More Cup of Coffee and Oh Sister and really that Desire record and the tour, the movie that just came out. Like I've been in love with that live. It's like live from 1975 bootleg series, which is like live recordings right after Desire came out, and like he's sort of reinterpreting like these songs from earlier in his career, and they're just incredible. Like there's this version of Hard Rain that's just insanely good. I mean, I haven't listened to him in a while, but I do. It's always kind of in my head, you know, that stuff. Stuff like "Oh Sister," you know, that's just like you kind of something that sort of brain falls back on, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was moving around living in Surrey at one time, and I had a friend loaned me a record player, and I just had 2 records, and one of them was Desire. I had Desire on the turntable, and then I had the cover on a bedside table with a rose sort of resting up against it. But I love that album.
What was the other one that you had?
Oh God, I don't know. It slipped my mind. It's a really good question.
So pales in comparison to
a friend lent me a few blues things, and then I just had 2. It may have been another Dylan one. Maybe come back to me. But it's I don't know, something about the narrative in that album. It may have been Blood on the Tracks. I think it probably was. Yeah.
That's
the student bought me one of the albums. Yeah, and just thinking about those 2 albums, actually, obviously classic breakup album there, and Blood on the Tracks. Is that? And are there any songs on there that you particularly like?
I can't think of them right off, but I really do like. I mean, that's a great one. It's a great record too. Yeah. It's been a little while. I did sort of listen when that the documentary came out. I played that live bootleg thing a bit, and it is great. I mean, his singing is just incredible on that thing.
Yeah, I don't know. There's some controversy in a recent. Was it Rolling Stones or one of the best singers? 100 best singers of all time came out, and Dylan's in there. Of course, people sort of tend to argue that he can't sing, and
yeah, I mean, you know, I think you either love him or you hate him. I guess.
I'd put him up there. I'd put him up there. Yeah. I think the thing is that you can't say that he can't hold a tune, or he can't hold a note. You know, that's the thing. If you're looking at singing from a technical point of view, he's never out of tune.
Yeah, he's a great singer. I mean, you know, in my humble opinion, I think he's incredible. But he can do the thing. He can, you know, whatever, sing. I don't want to say properly because that doesn't make any sense. But I don't know. For me, it's never about like that kind of thing. It's just the way you're getting the song across. You know. In fact, a lot of I think the best singers are like just people who figured out how to use their own voice in like the best way that they can in service of like getting that song, you know, to hit people, you know, to grab people or whatever, you know.
So the thing about a non-trained voice, you know, I've always been drawn towards voices that are, you know, affect you on an emotional level rather than kind of classically trained or voices which might be good for repertoire music or something like that. And I think with Dylan, it's just, it gets right on in there, and there are certain voices that do that. And what is it about a voice?
Yeah, that's another. These are all really good questions and really hard to for me to put into words, because it's like, what is that thing? You know, you just hear something, you're like, that's great, that's killing me. Let's
have a look at, you know, some of the reviews on your voice. I think the critics babys, do you know what I want me to go there? So the critics babysitting.
No, you can't.
On your voice, they said captivating and provocative. This guy's got a killer voice, top pick.
That's what I'm going for today, and I'm getting real close to this microphone.
So, you know, what makes a killer voice for you is my question.
I mean, have no idea. Honestly, I think it's...
Apparently you've got one.
I don't know, maybe for some people. I mean, I think it's just, I don't know. Things hit you, I mean, why is... the most interesting singers to me, at least, right now, the way I'm thinking are people that have figured out with whatever voice they have to like really make it work with what they want to do. You know what I mean? It's like, it could be phrasing, it could be a whisperish kind of thing, or it could be like just screaming. You know what I mean? Like I think Townes Van Zandt is like a great singer in the way that like you have to listen to what he's saying,
Yeah, he commands attention.
Yeah, exactly. And he figured out how to do that with his with his voice, and I feel like commanding attention is kind of a good way to maybe explain it. And it it has to do with what I think people write too. I mean, if you're talking about people who write and sing, it's like it kind of goes hand in hand. The phrases that you write hopefully suit your kind of your voice in the way that you can. The way you sing something is almost more important than what it is. It's like Joni Mitchell can say, I made my baby cry, and it's so great. Whereas if you took that lyric and somebody else did it, maybe it wouldn't be as effective. I don't know. I mean, I don't know why that came to my head, but
well, I think using the word baby as well. Not everybody can get away with that, can they? Yet it's it's such a common pronoun, isn't it?
Yeah. In life too, it's like you can't always get away with. I think certain people can. Yeah. It's like if you put on a hat and you're like, nah, I can't pull this hat off.
There's a the Glasgow-based music print mag, Gold Flake Paint, and they're doing some really, really interesting work. And I found a quote on you as well, where they're talking about your gorgeous melodies and cracked vocals all shrouded under layers of darkening ambience. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I hope the check cleared to those guys.
Paint by numbers bullshit is quickly disposed of. So, yeah, that's a pretty good review as well. And what do you think is the state of play for print music mags?
I don't know. Print is I guess it's having a hard time these days. Is this Gold Flake Paint? Do they still have a print version?
Yeah.
Well, that's great. That's great.
Yeah. I think it's one of the only ones that I know of. It's really great that it's Glasgow, but it's a beautiful. They're beautiful editions. They look, aesthetically, it's like the equivalent of vinyl. But I wonder how long, how long they will be in print. Like anything in the magazine world, or it's pretty hard, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems like a pretty impossible thing. But I mean, some of them are still able to hold on. I'm not sure why.
What's it like over there? Do you have, we used to read NME, and I don't know.
Yeah,
it's changed so much.
I mean, the Village Voice was a big one that now is not. Brooklyn Rail is still going, and they actually have. They keep it in print, which is cool, but that's sort of a different thing. It's not really with the art world.
You mentioned Brooklyn, so you gig a lot at Pete's Candy Store. So I wanted you to tell us a bit about that, and how has performing there shaped your work? What kind of audience do you get there?
Yeah, I like pizza a lot. It's a good room with like, it sounds good. It's a intimate room, but it's like it's big enough that you can still get loud if you need to get loud. But it's like it's separate from the sort of bar areas. So like the people that are in there are people that want to listen, which is great. It's nice to be able to get really quiet too and have people, having that be a way to draw people in, as well as like the loud moments, if that makes sense. As far as like shaping what I do, I don't know. It's a really good place to bring new songs into a set and like see how they feel, amongst other songs that you played before, and you sort of can count on them. I like doing that. I like putting something brand new, or maybe one or two in there. And that's a good place to do that.
Yeah. So they're pretty open. What kind of performers do they get there?
It's pretty. They do have full bands sometimes, but it's usually more like solo or duo acts. I don't think they can't do like a full drum kit. But I think you can get in there with brushes, and you can definitely have electric guitars and stuff like that. But it never gets like full on rock. It's usually like folk-ish kinds of things, I would say.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about touring. You mentioned your Wonder City Tour Europe, which sound really interesting from what you've said about it. And I just wondered how different it is touring in Europe to touring in the States. Could you tell us about your experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say, I felt that touring in Europe was a little more friendly to musicians, maybe. I could be wrong, though. This is just based on like my experience, and also like I'm traveling, like I'm an American, so I'm kind of receiving this hospitality of somebody that's come from a distance, you know what I mean, which is different than like driving in your own country like a couple hours and playing a show. But I do think it's a little more common, I think, in Europe to be offered like a place to stay and like a home cooked meal and maybe some drinks and like hospitality, which go a long way if you're touring.
And what's your favorite country in Europe to tour in?
Oh, that's tough. I had really good experiences everywhere. Everywhere that I went. I don't know if I could say what was my favorite. That's a tough one. I'm trying to think, but yeah, I think I'll just be diplomatic and say I had really good experiences everywhere.
Okay, and for you, what are the most difficult aspects of being on the road?
The schedule sometimes, like the logistical stuff, like renting cars and returning cars and making flights and, trying to get like good night of sleep sometimes, if you're like, like different couches and makeshift beds and things like that.
Yeah. In my first episode, when I spoke with Maliki, he was talking about the kind of perceived glamour or romance of, being a touring musician. And he's a professional busker, so to speak, but he sort of hemisphere hops, going to the festivals in Europe.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
It's a pretty cool way of life. But he did talk to me about the, that it can be hard, and the reality of it, and people seem to... they see the busker on the street sort of magically appear. They don't see him kind of rocking up there at 7 a.m. to get that particular pitch, because that's the pitch he wants.
And carrying all the stuff that he needs to carry.
So when you're on tour, there's kind of the same sort of, you pop up in Berlin for the night and then you're off the next day. There's this sort of touring itinerant musician. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say here, but
I know what you mean. I mean, there's something great about it, and you can feel that when you do sort of just pop in somewhere, and it appears as though you just kind of show up and you play a show and you have some drinks and then you're off, and that is true. But there's a lot of stuff in between that's not as glamorous, I guess. I mean, that's an interesting thing to be like a traveling busker. I'd be really curious.
Have a listen to the
life.
podcast. It's
I will.
I think playing the festivals like Avignon, Edinburgh. There's a real community there as well. You are part of a community, and I think that's the other thing, isn't it? Musicians so often DIY musicians, as I see it, so often working in isolation, or they're in the studio, or they've got this degree of autonomy. They're going out and then they're performing, and that there is, I think about community for musicians, or even care for musicians that are on the road, and a lot of that's kind of missing, isn't it?
Yeah, that is something that, it is. I think it is like that, especially for people who are, doing it themselves. And I think that's true. Like we were talking earlier about the difference between recording at home and recording in a studio, especially as a solo artist. You are doing it sort of, I think a lot of people are doing it by themselves, which can be really good because you're making all decisions and you can do it exactly the way you want to, and you can consider it for as long a time or as short a time as you want, and you can stay up for days and just get something right, which is all great and all things you can't sort of do in a studio. But in a studio, you're going to have people around, and I think that changes things in a different way that you sort of can't get at home. And it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just a different thing. And there might be a time where you do something, and to you maybe it's, I didn't like that take or anything, and then somebody else experiencing it's no, I really like that. Or what if you did this? That, and those are things that I feel like when you talk about community, I think there's less of that, less real time collaboration maybe happening now. But I'm not. I can't. I can only speak for the small group of people that I know.
Let's talk about you self-producing your work. So, Oblivion, your album. What were the challenges you faced leading up to the release of that, and how did you negotiate any barriers to release?
That one, honestly, I just kind of threw it out there. It was almost like a test run for me and for this idea that I have, which is these arrangements of lots and lots of layered cello tracks, and just voice, or maybe just voice and one other instrument, but this kind of waves of cello.
Why cello?
I'm not sure. It just sort of happened. I do. I work in film scoring, and years ago I had this project that they were going to have me score, and they sent me like the temp tracks, which is like their ideas of what they might want, and like every single one had cello on it, and I couldn't play cello. I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? Like, they want all this cello. Like, should I look and try to find somebody?
Is there not a cello app?
I mean, and I can't, I don't write. I can read music like a tiny, tiny bit, but I couldn't see myself like writing something for somebody and having an actual cello. Mm-hmm. So like I found this really cheap cello, and I was like, let's just see what I can do, And I can barely play, I can play like 3 notes, 4 notes at a time, but I managed to sort of piece things together in a way that I really liked, and I started using it just tentatively on some of my songs. And then with this new track, Oblivion, I started arranging the cello, and before I knew it, I had like 16 tracks of cello, and some of it is like running through this old like 60s amp with the spring reverb and stuff, and it just became this other thing that it's almost like maybe you're not sure what it sounds like, but I'm really into it. I really like the way it sounds. I think I'm going to make a whole record called Oblivion Orchestra, as Oblivion Orchestra, and then it's going to be a group of songs that are pretty much all arranged that way, with just like a very simple, one take singing, and then the rest of it cello orchestrations. And it's some of it is like just banging on the cello too, like percussion stuff. That's what I've been working on lately, and it's coming together really nicely.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when you take an instrument and play it in a different way, whether that be sort of percussive guitaring style or playing,
I mean, so a lot of the different ways, like completely not knowing, like that's like kind of where the Oblivion comes from. It's like I really don't know how to play it in a traditional way, so all I can do is play it in like my own weird sort of fashion. But I like having these sort of limitations on like a project, like an idea, like these are the set sort of obstructions that you make for yourself. And then maybe you break a couple of the, rules here and there, but that's interesting too,
Yeah, I think, this kind of sort of existential, isn't it? It's creating restrictions or limitations or props maybe as well, but problems, and then working with them and kind of creating from that viewpoint rather than just letting yourself do anything. By imposing restrictions, you can come up with these alternative, perhaps freer forms, because there's an element of play in the composition as well.
That's really where I'm at now. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think I've always done that without knowing it at first, and then I sort of started to recognize it. I mean, like, this is it works for me to have that sort of idea. Like I made a record called Worry Not, and the idea was like just, I think I'd been avoiding like just singing and playing sort of in a straight way, like play guitar and sing. I tend to add lots and lots of things. And of course I did in the end add things on the record. But the idea that got me started was like, try to do one like in a sort of, be brave, just let the songs sing it without any, not anything but your voice and guitar. And then that's what got me started on that record. So yeah, I think it's helpful for me to have some idea like that limits it, so it's not just like, this could be anything.
Yeah,
I think that's
the danger.
Tough.
Danger is it might not be anything.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I think it was Philip Glass. I was listening to an interview with him, and he's talking about the cult of the amateur, and we live in this world of professionalism and getting, more and more experts, that kind of notion that if you're looking at it from a musician's viewpoint and you do have an element of play, there's something about the amateur that I think is quite freeing. So playing on an instrument that you don't know how to play and then seeing what happens.
Yeah, you said that way better than I did, for sure. Yeah, no,
I don't know about what time
idea.
Is it?
I don't know how to play this thing, and it is like play for me.
Yeah,
that happens when I play drums too, because I'm not really a drummer, but it's just so much fun. It's like I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit record and I'm going to bang on these things.
This is kind of where I'm at, because I've got an equipment list of instruments to hire, and I'm thinking, I'm going to have a go at that.
Yeah, it's great. It's really something. And even if it goes totally wrong for a minute, it shows you something, And then you come back at your instrument that you do play, and I think you appreciate it.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Spotify and Bandcamp and all the various platforms. A friend tweeted earlier that she's again disheartened that a musician said to her that he'd been listening to her tracks on Spotify, and but of course he hadn't bought her album, and she just put a tweet out to that effect that don't bother telling us if you've done that, because it's disheartening.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear that you've streamed my music again on Spotify.
Right.
Go and buy the album. Well, what do you think about all this?
That's a tough one. I mean, it's in some ways it's like radio maybe used to be, where you could hear things without owning it. It just popped on. But in another way, it's not, because you can listen to what you want on Spotify. So I don't know how I feel about it, really. I mean, I personally I love vinyl. I like owning records. I like putting on records, and I listen to them all the way through. I mean, I know this is like maybe an old school way of thinking, but I still listen to albums as albums, all the time. I don't know that it's good or bad. I just know that that's kind of where I am.
So there's something about the album, that is about the artist.
It feels that way to me. I mean, and that's what I sort of grew up on, I think it's I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just what I'm used to. I mean, I do like the physicality of it, though. I do love the sort of opportunity for the artwork and just having a thing. Like, I mean, I love books too, Like, I don't want to, for whatever reason, I'd much rather read an actual book than something on an iPad or whatever other device, But that's not to say that there's anything sort of wrong or bad about those other ways. It's just the thing, though, about Spotify is I think that it's not as fair to the musicians that are writing and playing on these songs, and not for me personally, but I think for a lot of indie artists that did have like an income before this streaming stuff happened. I think they don't have it anymore. I would imagine it's a bit of a blow, but I can't speak to it myself.
It's really complex, isn't it? Because if you think back to Dylan's heyday, I mean, getting airplay, being on the radio was the way forward,
Yeah.
And now we've got, we can, like you say, threw it out. When I produced my debut album, remember, I just got it out there. I got it out there because I wanted to get it out there.
Yeah.
This.
Well, it's like, what is a release now? It's a difficult thing.
The musical ecology that we're in now. A composer asked me a while back, and this really got me thinking. He said, "Why do you want to make an album, Sam?" And I said, well, because for me, it's something I've always wanted to do. It's been this secret kind of hope. And he said, well, that's the right answer. But his point was, why don't you just write a song? Why are we obsessed with the idea of the album, the narrative of the artist, the time of the artist's life? Is there even, a place for that in today's musical ecology where consumers are just playing, from playlists, and maybe there's some kind of unfounded value judgment here that I'm giving over.
That's possible, yeah. I mean, what you said struck a chord with me, just the time in the artist's life. I think that's why, for me, and I think maybe others like me, is that it does sort of represent that, like this Bill Callahan record as an example. It's like, it does feel like, this is a time in his life where he made this record, and it tells me a little bit about him in a certain way that you wouldn't necessarily get if you just heard one track, but maybe you would. And I mean, I don't know why. I don't know the answer for myself. It does feel like sonically and there's sort of a feeling of these songs belong together in my brain. Yeah. I don't know if that has to do with the time or my own, sort of experience, or if it's even true, but it feels that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think it's nostalgic to sort of want an album to make sense of an artist's life at a certain time, and I think that's what we're kind of losing. That's part of what we're losing in current sort of streaming climate, and this sort of throwawayness that we're...
But there were, before albums were the dominant sort of way of what people did, it's like there was this, there were like the Motown singles and stuff, all that was so great. That was a different mindset too. It's like people had singles, people had hits, and then you'd wait for the next one, and it was just a song. So, or one song at a time, I should say. But it's different in the way that I think playlists do change it somehow, but it's hard to grasp. It's hard to know, when you're sort of such an old school listener like me, where I'm just like putting on records and sitting down and listening to the whole thing. It's hard to know how. Yeah, sorry.
I think the thing about the playlist, what's interesting is it puts me in mind of Instagram and mass curation, and obviously somebody is curating that playlist. I can put together a playlist, you listen to it, you like what you like, and you don't like what you don't like. But the point is that there is somebody there curating that, and we live in this climate of curation, don't we? So I suppose there's a sort of... Again, the playlist being given to us, there's something kind of lazy or time poor about it, but that's the reality for most people. They're listening on their commute to music, and they've only got a few minutes, and maybe listen to a playlist is the most democratic or convenient thing to do.
Right. Well, like radio is curated too, though. If you downloaded like an hour of radio, it would be similar. But it's a little more. Yeah, I don't know. I have to think about that.
Thinking about Worry Not, your 6-song EP is out on Bandcamp. Yeah, so we talked a little bit about it. Do you think Bandcamp is an effective platform? If so, why?
I like it. I think it's the best
how do you
place
use it
now. Sorry? What?
How do you use it?
I mean, I use it so far. I've used it to kind of be either an alternative to like buying things directly off of my site, or an alternative to like iTunes or Amazon, or the other digital kind of distributors. It's hard to know. I mean, as someone who makes records, I think Bandcamp is a really good site. It works well. It's pretty fair as far as like the way things go when you sell, stuff through them. I don't know, music listeners, I don't know how plugged in they are to like Bandcamp. Something tells me that they need to sort of be directed to it, that people aren't just hanging out on Bandcamp scrolling. Maybe they are, but it doesn't seem though.
It's interesting though with a lot of these platforms. I'm thinking back to when SoundCloud, kicked off, and then there's always this sort of social vibe that is set up. You've got to follow to be followed, and if you're not, they want to get a community going.
I know, it's always this follow.
I always wonder,
thing,
how successful is this, and how much do musicians actually go down that road in terms of building their fan base on Bandcamp?
And also how much time and how many different sites can you go around and then try to collect like followers and likes, and how many times can you ask your people to be like, can you follow me on this thing and then this thing, and then
sort of infinite.
I do sort of wish it could just exist and like, hey, if you want my stuff, like, it's on Bandcamp, this is a cool site, check this link. And that's kind of how I try to use it, but I'm certainly not an expert on how to like get stuff distributed well, and how to get it out to people.
And in 2010, you found yourself newly unsigned. How did that affect you at the time?
I don't know. I mean, it just kind of rolled with it. There's been a couple of times where like I've been on labels and then I've been off labels, or the label disintegrates, and the last time the label merged with another slightly bigger label that was not as interested in things like my record for whatever reason. You just have to kind of say, oh well, I guess that happened, and move on. I mean, yeah. I mean,
so moving on, what's next for you?
Well, I'm working on this Oblivion Orchestra record, which I think is going to be under that name. And I've got like 6 or 7 songs done, and I'm working on new ones now. So I'm hoping that'll be out sometime next year. And then I don't know. I'll see what happens.
That's great. And where can we find you online, Josh, apart from Bandcamp?
Well, jallenmusic.com is my site, and that's got kind of everything, videos and links and stuff. I think that's the best place to point people.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today, and it's been great, and I hope we stay in touch, and I will listen out for your stuff, and it's been a privilege.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Okay, thanks, Josh. Take care.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Are you still there? Okay. Did I lose you?
No, you haven't lost me.
Oh, okay.